And if I can make homemade bread every day, this is our daily bread, then so can you. So that's why I'm showing you in real time, so bear with me. Let's gather our ingredients. 6 ingredients, and I will post the recipe. We found this recipe online. I'll post it for you. We just modified it a hair. 6 ingredients. So, number 1, I'm going to need milk. And we ran out of raw milk, and our milk pickup isn't for 2 more days, so we're going to make do with organic. Milk, olive oil, salt, sugar, which is over here, flour, obviously, and yeast. Now, the recipe calls for rapid rise yeast, but we had a friend helping us out when I was pregnant at our house, and she made this for us a bunch of times, and she didn't read the rapid rise part, and she just used regular, and it turned out the same. So, not sure how important that is, but we have some rapid rise on hand. I'm going to switch out and try organic soon, so I'll let you know how that goes, but rapid rise yeast is what the recipe calls for. Okay, get your bread machine tub, which we've just washed. We make this literally every day, so, and don't forget your bread machine paddle. That was a little disaster last week.
The background, by the way, is the Garden of Goodness. It shows up really nicely with the sun out there.
We haven't built the garden yet, so we just have 2 lavender plants and a blackberry and a few mints and basils, but hopefully,
working on it.
Yeah, we'll get there. Okay, measuring cups. And measuring spoons. Real time.
That's right.
In fact, this is even slower than usual because I'm talking to you. It's slowing me down. Okay, milk. Oh, with pasteurized you don't have to shake, but I'm in the habit. Okay, 1.5 cups. Now, sugar. We use 3 rounded teaspoons, and there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. Oh, this is wet. Let me dry this out real quick. But rounded tablespoon of sugar. We use organic cane sugar in our family. You could use honey. I'm sure you could substitute for using, some stevia too, but
No, the sugar actually does something to the bread.
well, it's such a small amount that I don't think it makes a big deal. It's really just the sweet is all we're doing here.
Oh, I thought it was some ingredient that does something. Anyway.
1.5 teaspoons of salt. We use a good mineral salt. Even sea salt, I read from Dr. Mercola, is often bleached. So you want to be sure you're getting a real mineral salt. This is the brand Real Salt. I buy it in bulk and refill my jars. Fill up a jar. Himalayan pink salt, but really, in our opinion, just any kind of natural salt, naturally occurring salt that hasn't been fooled with. And the recipe calls for 4.5 teaspoons of olive oil, which is the same thing as 1.5 tablespoons. So I just use my tablespoon. So 1 tablespoon and a half. And I obviously eyeball that. I'm running out of olive oil. Okay. So that was 4 ingredients. Now, use my soapy dish rag to wipe off my fingers. Flour. And it was 4 cups of flour and 2 teaspoons of yeast. Into the bread machine. Make sure you're on the rapid rise cycle, rapid bake cycle. And that's it. 58 minutes from now, we will have a hot, fresh, delicious loaf of bread. We enjoy that every day. Now, why don't we go to the other room real quick? And I'll tell you why. Oh, why Spelt? Some of you might be wondering, why Spelt? Why Spelt bread? Here, come out of the kitchen because the bread machine's a little bit... I just didn't want the noise to be annoying while we were talking.
Okay.
But some of you might be wondering, why Spelt bread? And how did you decide that? And where does that come from? Rule got really inspired about the whole wheat problem. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about gluten intolerance, celiac disease, and there's a lot of talk about, we need to avoid carbs, we need to avoid bread, there's the paleo diet, and there are some very real concerns there. And so Rule got really inspired to research this thing and hound it down, and he learned some really great things. We did it together, and we learned some really important things, we think. The wheat that is like the modern wheat that we enjoy today, the conventional wheat, was in the 70s and 80s, it was genetically tampered with. This was before genetic modification became sophisticated, if you will, before they had developed the technology to take the genes from a bacteria and splice it into the genes of a plant. So you can't call it genetically modified, because that exact procedure hadn't been refined yet. So this is like a shoddier job of genetic modification. They did things like exposing the endosperm, the embryo or whatever. They would expose it to toxins, expose it to radiation, expose it to anything they could think of that might induce mutations. Because if evolution is true, then for things to get better and better and better, we need more mutations. Now, in our family, we're Christians. We believe the Bible, and so we don't believe that mutations got us to where we are today. We believe that God created us really well, and that when we have mutations, those are because of sin, and those are generally harmful and lead to death. And that's what we see with things like cancer and stuff like that. So the evidence kind of backs up our position there, so it makes sense. But that's where we're coming from. So we thought, okay, why is wheat harmful to people? Why are people being hurt by wheat? Why is gluten intolerance a problem? Why do we have leaky gut syndrome? Why is the GAPS diet so helpful? What's going on here? And we discovered this business about the genes being modified in the 70s and 80s at the genetic level, which really comes out of that other worldview that we don't buy into. So we thought, well, the Bible says that bread is good. It says that Jesus is the bread of life, that the Bible is the bread of life. And so we're like, well, clearly bread is a good thing. There's this period in the Bible where God had his people wandering around in the desert for 40 years, and he fed them. It's one of the great miracles of the Bible. He fed them by bread raining from heaven. And I thought, well, for goodness sake, if there's only one food to eat every day, God thought, if you don't need anything else, you need bread. And so in our family, we think eating bread is important for our health, but we don't want to eat that modern bread. So we learned that spelt is one of the ancient grains, and many believe, we learned and we heard, and we think it's probably true, that spelt is the very bread that people were eating in the time of Abraham and the time of Jesus. So when Jesus talks about being the bread of life, the wheat that he was talking about, the kernels of wheat the disciples ate going through the grain fields, that we believe is the grain that today we call spelt. Back then it was called wheat. Today we call it spelt. So that is why we eat spelt. We eat it a lot, and we found it really helpful for our health. Rula, do you want to tell a little about spelt or why we like it? Or
But it fills up and it fills you up. Spelt fills you up really nicely, and it doesn't make you you don't get a sugar high. It's more balanced, we think, so there's more protein in you know, the ratio of protein to carbs is better. So it just gives it's a wonderful flavor, as opposed to, you know, if you just have whole wheat from the store, that's usually not all that great of a flavor. This is a wonderful flavor.
And Roel comes from Holland, and he came out of a family that would eat bread 2 meals a day. The main thing would be bread. And after we got married, he started putting on a few pounds. And when we switched to Spelt, he didn't diet, he didn't do anything. And we actually let him start eating more of the bread again, because for a while we were thinking we should stay away from it. And he got back to eating that bread with the Spelt, and that weight just fell off him. So
yeah, I'm not gaining because of eating much bread every day.
Exactly. So we love einkorn and we love Spelt. So we'll show you a picture of what it looks like when it's all done.
Here's our beautiful Spelt bread out of the bread machine, all nice and hot and warm. So I'm going to cut a piece off of it. Put a little butter on it.
You want a little piece?
I want a piece. I love our bread.
It's all nice.
I love
So-
boiled bread on the second piece that's yummy like that.
Mm-hmm.
No, you tell me. Can you get that from the store? Bread hot out of the oven. The butter just melts on it.
No,
The
ma'am.
bread melts in your mouth.
No, ma'am.
30 minutes.
With the bread.
That's right. 30 minutes later.
All that's left is the paddle.
Happy
the whole
day.
bread is gone.
Jonathan's doing something in the kitchen. Okay, goodbye.